Welcome to this webinar, Cracking the Code, Fighting Promo Abuse and Gig Economy. I'm Jennifer Rosa, your host for today's session. I'm very excited to have this conversation with my guests, Danielle Miguez from Zeta Delivery and Sudhir Lanka from Grubhub. We're very glad you joined us today. As we go through the session, we'd love to hear your questions so we can make sure that we get the most out of this time together. So please type questions or comments in the chat as we go, and we will address as many as we can, either during the presentation or at the end during our Q&A time. And in case you're wondering, we'll be sending out the video recording of the session by email as soon as it's available. And if you don't mind, please let us know where you're joining from in the chat. It's always fun to see where everyone is tuning in from. All right, so next, let's do some introductions so you can get to know the three of us a little bit. I'm going to start with myself. I'm Jennifer. I'm currently a customer success coordinator at Incognia, specialized here in helping tackling fraud in the food delivery and ride sharing industries. On that note, if you're watching this webinar, you'd probably enjoy some of our previous webinar recordings on topics like driver fraud, refund abuse, fraud as a service, and you can check them out on the Incognia site under resources. Now let's go to our speakers. Can you please guys introduce yourselves? Let's start with you, Sudhir.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenny. Hi everyone. My name is Sudhir Lanka, as she mentioned, of course, before. I'm currently working as a senior manager at Grubhub, leading our fraud prevention efforts across the three sides of our marketplace: diner, driver, and restaurants as well. Um, kind of I think promo abuse has been a tricky situation, tricky fraud that we've been dealing for the last 2 to 3 years, and I'm really excited to be kind of speaking here, share insights and learn from everyone here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Danny?
Thank you, guys. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniele. You can call me Dani. I'm a head of fraud prevention in Zé Delivery in Brazil and Tada Delivery in Latin America, both D2C channels in AB and Bev. Thank you, Jenny, Cognia, and Sudhir for the invitation. I'm always excited to talk about promo abuse that is leading the top. Emergence kinds of fraud in the world. So thank you so much. It's very important for our business, and let's go.
Yeah, let's go. So here's what we'll be covering today. We're going to start by digging into how fraudsters exploit promotions, their tactics, their tools, with some real life examples. Next, we'll talk about why detecting promo abuse is really challenging and warning signs to look for that indicate abuse is happening. And lastly, we'll get more tactical and discuss how to prevent promotion abuse without sabotaging growth and how to get on the same page as the marketing or the growth teams. So, with that context, let's jump into our first topic, which is the promo abuse playbook. What does prem abuse actually look like, and how are fraudsters pulling it off at scale? Before you can crack down on prem abuse, it's helpful to understand the playbook. Let's walk through the most common tactics and tools we're seeing across platforms. Here's a delivery, Grubhub, and other ones. Before we hear from our speakers on this one, I actually want to hear from our audience first. I'm going to launch our first poll, and the question is, which promo abuse tactic have you seen abused most often? So help us here with your answers. All right. Um, I'm going to start with a question for Daniele. I know your team at that delivery has uncovered some pretty complex tactics tied to promotion abuse. Can you walk us through some examples and what made them tricky to catch?
Of course. Well, let's start with something that I always say about this type of fraud. Promo abuse is a very silent kind of fraud. And what I mean by that is it doesn't represent an obvious loss that will cause a direct or even immediate financial impact, like we see in chargeback, in account takeover, for example. So it becomes really difficult to detect. And to clarify that, at the beginning of our operation in Zedeliver, our coupon campaigns, especially the most aggressive ones, the ones with the biggest discounts, they seem to deliver amazing results at first sight. Coupons run out in few hours or even few minutes, generating high volumes of transactions, new customers. MGM campaigns, they can brought thousands of new customers in very in bars in record times. And these results initially they gave you the impression that the campaigns were bringing great value to your company. However, if you look to this scenario with refined lens or fraud prevention lens, you see that you see things such as 80% of the coupons being used by 4 or 5 devices. You can see 50 to 60 or 70% of the new consumers, they share at least one data point in common. So the question that remains for the team is, are these campaigns really bringing the expected results? So talking about the silent type of fraud and what make it tricky to catch is, first of all, if you don't have the tools to identify these patterns that I just mentioned. So I think it's the scenario that we can begin to talk about.
Right. And so there, I'm curious, do you see similar patterns at Grubhub? What forms of promo abuse tend to show up the most often on your side?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think before I get to what I have to say, right? I totally agree with what Danny mentioned. I think promo abuse is it's very silent, it's very subtle. It's not it's unlike the traditional fraud that we all see, which is account takeovers or payment fraud or anything else. It's very silent, right? It's very persistent, right? Now, while I agree with Danny, I think my view is slightly kind of expanded, right? So when I say that, from my perspective, I think promo abuse comes from two different directions, right? One is it's coming from the diner or the customer side, and the other one is from the restaurant side as well, right? On the diner side, as what she mentioned earlier, is that what we have is, on the lighter side, we have loyal customers like you and me just saying that, hey, let me just create a couple of more accounts, maybe let me just take advantage of the let's say new user promo, right? Let me do that. They don't think it's fraud, it's like a borderline abuse kind of thing. So kind of it's fraud or not, you just don't know, right? But on the other side, we also have like these professional fraudsters that are running these things like companies. It's like almost like a business. They are kind of they're able to recycle devices, swim swapping, and like much more advanced techniques. They are kind of communicating on Telegram and Discord, and like many more things are happening, right? And that's what we see on the diner side, right? Now, if we talk about the restaurant side, this is where it gets a little bit tricky now. On the restaurant side, let's say we onboard a new restaurant on our platform. A lot of restaurants do offer their own promotions to attract new customers, to make sure that their restaurant kind of comes up on the top in our search algorithm, right? So they kind of offer more and more promos to ensure that their food is kind of tasted by everyone, and like word of mouth spreads, right? Fraudsters, which of course when they're coming in as in the form of diners, they target heavily these kinds of restaurants, right? Like they're kind of placing very high velocity of orders on these restaurants again and again. Of course, they're trying to exploit the promos, right? The other type that's coming from the restaurant side is what we see on our side is more of a collusion, or let me say more of a complicity in the fraud itself. So the fraudster can create the restaurant, but they also can create a customer or a diner account. So they're basically coming in and placing orders to their own restaurant, which is a fake restaurant. um, and there's no food to be delivered, right? So essentially they're just simply pocketing the money that we as Grubhub will give out for the service that they provided, plus the promo amount that we're also paying out, right? So it's almost like a double hit that we're going to have. So collusion, or this aspect is a little bit more complicated, and how do we detect it is become kind of, it goes into that tricky part of the problem solving. So yeah, I mean, that's what we're seeing, at least on our side. um so yeah, I mean, that's been our experience so far.
So you mentioned some differences between the user that is abusing and creating multiple accounts, and then the professional fraudsters, and how the restaurants are colluding as well. So what are the tactics that you are seeing, tactics or tools that you see these fraudsters, especially the more professional ones, are using to scale promotion abuse?
So yes, I mean, absolutely. I think, with this new advent of, like, AI, let's say, right, with the advancement of so many technologies, I think fraudsters have been adapting, right? We've seen fraudsters, there's like, kind of huge device farms that they're coming from. Like, there's like, at the same time they're creating multiple new accounts. At the same time, they're either using emulators, or they're just like huge human farms creating multiple accounts at the same time. We've also seen synthetic identities being created, right? Like, kind of, let's say, a real social security number but attached with a fake name and a fake phone number or something like that, and they're just creating multiple personas like this, right? And this is the extent of what we have seen so far. There's probably much more going on, but I think it's the next step forward. I think this is where the I hoping the discussion and like the industry goes towards, but there's much more happening, probably, right? So yeah.
Right. And Daniela, does that match what you are seeing on your side as well?
Yes, sure. Well, to in short, to abuse a promotion, fraudsters need to create or have access to multiple fake accounts, and we see clearly that in the past, this just required a pool of third-party information, and with it, you can create multiple several accounts with third-party data. So we started to advance with device detection, and fraudsters have to reinvent it themselves. So now, with this, fraudsters are using multiple devices, and it's no longer enough to use device detection. They are using, as Sudhi was saying, device emulators, app tampering. So if you don't combine this device detection with geolocation, device integrity checks, and combining all this data, you are going to be fraudsters are going to be ahead of you, and we cannot forget the usage of AI. It's getting more difficult to us because fraudsters are using Gen AI to bypass our existing blocks and our existing checks for this kind of multiple accounts creating. And I think it's get even more difficult because some regular consumers are starting to use AI. I don't know if you are facing this kind of thing in your platforms too, but sometimes we are seeing that the consumer, the legitimate consumer, is starting to use an AI or use an AI agent to place our order in your app. And we have to distinguish this kind of user, good user, trying to use AI, and the fraudster using Gen AI to create robots that can bypass our blocking existing rules. So it's very interesting. We are going to see a lot the next months about this topic. So
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the methods evolve so quickly and why it's so important to keep up with all these methods and be able to detect how they're scaling up the fraud, right? And one interesting thing that we saw around this challenge of promotion abuse, we see that the challenges that you have as a delivery in Brazil and Latin America in general, and then Grubhub, they are very similar for different platforms in different geographies. Earlier this year, we released the 2025 Incognia Frontline Report, Gig Economy Edition. It's available on our website and here if you want to check it out. And in the last year's data, we saw that 48% of all consumer side fraud that we detected on delivery and ride sharing platforms, they were related to promotion abuse. 48% of all the fraud detected related to promotion abuse. So this is one of the most widespread forms of fraud that we are seeing on these platforms right now. And there are some common mistakes that we see happening, such as when the marketing team and the fraud prevention teams are not aligned on the strategy to release the marketing campaigns. Things can get nasty, right? So one example that we saw is one food delivery platform told us that their marketing team ran a particular promotion despite the fraud team warning that the campaign design was susceptible to abuse. And then they ran it again. Afterward, the fraud team estimated that 90% of the promo budget went to fraudsters. So it's a huge loss. So the goal of these campaigns are always to get new customers, to encourage more orders from existing customers. But if they're not aligned, the fraud prevention and marketing teams, then these budget goes into a leaky bucket. And another mistake that we usually see some platforms making is trusting the device that they are seeing. So what we see when Sudhir mentioned the fraudsters, the professional ones that scale up their operations, they generally use either emulators or app cloners. With emulators, they can simulate multiple devices and more easily automate the creation and access to multiple accounts, which is what you face, right, Danny? Multiple accounts being used. And then on the app cloner side, it's going to allow these fraudsters to run multiple instances of the applications and most of the time also change the original source code, modifying the whole app. So in essence, what you are going to see if you look at these devices or the device that comes from an app cloner is that it's a different session, it's a different person, it's a different device. So if it's not detected, abuse is going to happen for sure. All right, so let's go to our next section, which is the detection dilemma. Detecting fraud and abuse isn't always black and white, right? Especially when it comes to promotion abuse. It's very silent, it's very hidden, and there's a thin line dividing what's a good user, what's an abuser, and what's a professional fraudsters. I know that different platforms can classify fraud and abuse in a different way, and we're not going to touch that today. But in this section, we're going to get into the vulnerabilities, the blind spots, and the subtle signals that teams need to watch for. So I'm going to start with you, Sudhir. How do you draw this line between promo abuse and savvy user? What makes something cross into abuse territory in your opinion? I know that this is a tricky one to define, but how do you see this difference between promo abuse and savvy user?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that this question is harder than actually finding promo fraudsters, I would say. But I think kind of getting back to the question, right? It's as you mentioned, it's really really tricky to actually define what is promo abuse, right? So this is something that you or we as a company have to kind of sit with our teams and figure out, hey, what do we consider to be the borderline abuse or like the actual abuse that's happening, right? It's more in the gray area, right? Now, but I think kind of if we start breaking it down, right, I'd look at it in two different levels, right? The first one, I'd like to look at what I call as intent. If a user is, let's say, they're bending their rules to kind of create a few accounts to take advantage of a few promos, let's say a new user promo or a reactivation promo as such. I think it should be fine, unless you're like the long-term value of the customer itself is they're creating a loss for you as a company. Generally, it should be fine, right? Now, if we kind of move on to the next point, which is what I call the scale and deception, right? Now this is where things are moving more into the abuse area, right? If there is deliberate misrepresentation, like fake accounts, false identities are being created, or there's a coordinated effort to kind of extract or abuse promo on our platform, right? So that's obviously what we call abuse, right? Plain and simple, right? um, and generally that's how we'd like to look at things, right? But looking simply at the top line metrics, right, that's not going to help you. As what Danny mentioned earlier, what we call here is like manufactured growth versus real growth. You should be able to identify, hey, who are my real users and who are just abusing our platform, is something that if we want to kind of have that distinction, there are kind of a few things that we can look at. But let me kind of just go through maybe top three, right? The first one, what I talk about is the identity recycling, right? So it's important that we know the identity of every person that's coming on our platform, right? If, for example, if you see multiple emails, payment methods or devices or IP addresses, whatever, right? If these kinds of these attributes are repeating across multiple new accounts, right? That is a clear cut case of people are creating multiple personas to just use your promo and just abuse and just take the money out of you, right? The second one, could be the manipulation of the way they're placing the order, right? Let's say the tech manipulation, right? For example, it could be tampering with the app, or using an emulator, or kind of recycling multiple devices, right? So all these, if you have a way to, if you have these kinds of indicators, if you have a way to identify these, that could be a good indicator to say that, hey, these are sophisticated fraudsters, which they are at play, and they're kind of manipulating how your platform sees them and just abusing the promos, right? And the last one, what is the behavior that you see on your platform, right? Like more of a saying that, hey, do you see a sudden spike in the velocity of the orders, or sudden spike in the number of accounts that are being signed up, number of promos being redeemed? What Danny mentioned earlier is that, if your promos are done within minutes, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. You just need to figure out like what is good and what is bad, right? So kind of looking for that anomalous behavior would definitely be helpful. And that is definitely a good way to distinguish a fraudster as compared to a savvy user, let's say a loyal or a clever user, right? So I think as kind of figuring out how, where do you draw the line, is really important. And these are some ways you can do that. And once they cross that line, once they kind of go into that abuse area, it's a fraudster, it's a fraud problem, and this is something that we have to deal with, right? So at least that's how we think about how we deal with promo abuse here.
Jenny,
So we have a
Jenny,
question on the chat.
Mm-hmm.
just 1 minute.
Yes, Danny?
Just to add something to what Sudhir said, I 100% agreed. And and actually, catching from abuse is really a dilemma, because you will always have a gray zone
Yep.
that it's hard, it's a boost, it's a fraud, and you don't know. Just to give an example, if you have a device with a single account, great personal data, okay, it's our dream as fraud prevention that all the users were like that, but they are not. On the other side, we have a user that has a single device that has 400 accounts related to this, and I wish it were a fictional example, but it's not.
Yeah.
But you have a gray zone in the middle of this situations that is a device, for example, a single device with 3 accounts. What do you do with this kind of consumer? Do you allow them to go through your app? Do you take off the allowed of this consumer to use your coupon? So and connecting to what we are going to talk about, the connection with the growth team. And this there is an incorrect answer to this. So
Hmm.
it's real a dilemma, just to reinforce what Sudhir is talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And we had a question here on the chat. Um, if you guys could share how data can be used to prevent fraud. Let's think about the scope of promotion abuse. How are you guys using data to detect and prevent those kind of abuses from happening?
Yeah, I think starting out, like, if you're just looking at the kind of very basic things, something you can look at is uh, you know simple velocity checks, right? Saying that, hey, somebody kind of uh, do you see a certain spike in orders? If yes, are they using a lot of promos? Are they maybe stacking the promos on a single order? They just kind of using multiple promos on a single order? Or you can say that on their account itself, does all of their orders have a promo in them, right? So it's potential indicator to say that, hey, it could be abused, right? But if you kind of advance a little bit more, right? So what we call the fraud linkage is something you can look at, saying that if somebody's trying to abuse your promotions, right? They want to come with new account every single time, is what we're calling a new persona, right? So they can create a new account again and again, let's say with a different email address. So they can say that, like, for example, Sudhir at gmail.com, and then Sudhir plus one at gmail.com, and they just keep adding, like, modifying their email address to come up with a new account every single time. Or they can change the IP, they can manipulate their device, and like there's so many other ways that you should be able to look at if they're somehow manipulating your platform.
And just to
Right,
add
thank you.
something, for fraud prevention, the more data you have, the best. So I think a good strategy is use all of your data that you have and use third party provided specializing in some kind of data like device ID, device integrity, and combine all this data that you have to detect this kind of abuse or fraud.
And on this topic, Danny, could you share an example of an early sign that a campaign, early warning sign that a campaign has become a target for abuse?
Of course. Well, no matter how much existing fraud prevention tools or blocks do you have, you will always miss something, and some campaigns will uh, um, can show us something that we're missing. So it's very important to have a strong monitoring in place in addition to this existing blocking tools. So monitor data and behavior patterns in repetition in general. It's essential to identify these existing loopholes. And to answer you and give some examples, you can, for example, track the velocity at which coupons are being used in a certain campaign. You can track user usage per device in this specific coupons. You can see concentration on delivery addresses, um, geolocation, and KPIs that can show you that that can be a sign of that your campaign is with a kind of abuse, and it requires quick action, and you can retrofeed your rules and block these new patterns. So some examples of
And
the signs.
and we also have a question that I believe is for you. Could you elaborate on legitimate customers starting using AI? What kind of cases were you referring to?
Well, I have an example. We had a good user that created with ChatGPT, I think, if I'm not remembering it wrong, but using ChatGPT, this consumer was able to place an order, a real order in our app using web, uh, and it was not able to add alcoholic beverages, but guarana and other soft drinks that we have here. And it was a real consumer that using an agent in ChatGPT place an order by web in our platform, and we actually deliver this order. So we cannot block this kind of usage, and at the same time we have to identify Gen AI using being used by fraudsters. So this is the most recently example that we had.
Oh my gosh. Um, I'm gonna go to a question for Sudhir right now. Sudhir, are there certain types of promo campaigns or internal processes that you found are especially vulnerable to abuse?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Of course, of course, Grubhub, and of course, I'm assuming other platforms as well. We offer a lot of different types of promos, and there's always some or other promo happening, right? But I think from what I've seen, there's like a few promos which are being targeted heavily by the fraudsters. For example, the new user promo, right? If it all it takes is to create a new account to get a new user promo, just change your email or phone number. Anybody can get a phone number these days. You can just get a VoIP phone number, or as I mentioned earlier, just simply change one letter in your email. You can create a new account, right? So it's very very easy these days to create new accounts, and if all that it takes to get a promo, and that's the reason it's the biggest target that we see. We also see the referral promos, especially in cases where both the referrer and the referee both get the rewards, right? Let's say $5 each, right? So I've seen device farms, or basically they're using emulators to create accounts, so many accounts, thousands of accounts, and just refer themselves. So they're just taking both the promo amounts from both the sides, and I think that's definitely a big target for the fraudsters. And as I mentioned earlier in my earlier point, is also this, we also see a big hit on the merchant funded promos, right? So the restaurants which are offering promos to kind of ensure that they get more and more traction on our platforms, fraudsters do target them. And in some cases we do take the hit as a company, and sometimes they restaurants do that, so we end up compensating for them. So it's a tricky situation. It's more about understanding why fraudsters are targeting certain types of promos, and how they are kind of trying to get through, right? Trying to understand those vulnerabilities and how you can fix it. Saying that, hey, let the promo run. Maybe I'll do a kind of an analysis later and try to understand why or how we lost money is not an option anymore, because we're losing millions and millions of dollars. So it has to be more of a real time approach, a real time detection. And I think that's of critical importance. Yeah.
And then, what do you think is one common blind spot or assumption that causes teams to miss from abuse for longer than they should?
Well, just I think it's we need to separate in two levels of maturity. So talking about companies that don't have a specialized fraud prevention team, the most common blind spot is when you are evaluating campaigns just looking to growth metrics, and this one that I mentioned before, like new customers, the volume of new orders in your app, and you don't look to your key financial metrics, long-term key financial metrics. So this is the common blind spot. So, and for fraud prevention team, I think, as we were saying, is when you are more superficial than the fraudsters are being. So if you're looking only to only detecting device ID, and the fraudsters are using emulators, are using app tampering, you are going to have your blind spot for a long time. So talking about fraud prevention team, I think, just to summary, it's when you are the fraudsters are ahead of you using advanced techniques, more advanced than you are using. So you're going to see fraud happening later. So I think we need to separate these two levels of maturity.
Yeah. And I believe it's especially difficult when we're talking about a new user because you don't have much information about who this person is, about their consumption. Most of the times, it could be a new device, for example. So usually platforms have very little data about them. So the dilemma is how can you make sure that what you are seeing is a real user, a user that you want to retain versus a fraudsters that should be blocked or at least limited on what they can do on the platform. And one of the ways Incognia can help platforms with this is by using the device intelligence and the precise location to identify uh, users that are coming back to the platform, creating new accounts or accessing existing accounts to leverage these promotions and coupons. And when we talk about location, when there is concentration of this behavior in the same location, then you can start to be suspicious. For example, if you're seeing 15 new accounts that have used promotions, only promotions in the last 2 weeks, or they have a very high concentration in promotions among the purchases. That's obviously suspicious. So we had a question here about geofencing. Let me try to find it. Um, can geofence using latitude, longitude pings effectively identify repeated new unique users, fraudsters exploiting promotions? Yeah, the short answer is yes. And with our solution, we can identify the location very precisely. And if there's a concentration, we can identify abuse in that environment. What we are mostly seeing is the use of some tooling to try to bypass the device ID. Most of the times, when we talk to prospects or new customers, one of the mistakes that we see them doing is rely on a device ID solution that was not made for preventing frauds. And we worked with a platform, for example, that previously used an advertising ID for fraud prevention, obviously not intended for fraud prevention. It's intended for marketing purposes. And this device ID, this advertising ID worked for some time, but then the fraudsters figured out how to bypass it, sometimes simply by reinstalling the applications, and other times by using certain tools like emulating the device or masking the device attributes by using app cloners. So to your question, Zafar, what we are seeing as more helpful to fight promotion abuse is re-identifying this device using multiple accounts and devices that are using more advanced techniques. And to another level that we're going to cover, they also try to reset the device. So geofencing can be used, but it's not the what we are seeing as the best approach right now. Um, all right. So I think we can go to the next section now, the crackdown. So this is where it gets tricky. You know, abuse is happening, but cracking down can come with trade-offs. So how do we enforce stronger protections without creating friction for good users and hampering growth? Daniele, why don't you start us off? What methods have you found to be the most successful for preventing promotion abuse without causing friction for good users?
Of course, Jenny. So, well, first of all, we need to take the root cause. The root cause. So, the creation and the use of multiple fake accounts, in this case of promo abusion. So, it's essential to have a solid strategy for to prevent a single bad actor from creating, as I said, for example, 400 accounts. So, in this stage, and I'm talking about the creation of account, the login in your app or platform, it's crucial that you have advanced techniques such as device detection, device integrity checks, or and all this combined with geolocation. to act quietly. As I said, promo abuse is a silent fraud. Ask if you ask the consumer a lot of data, a lot of documents and personal data, you are going to put a lot of more friction. And I think it's never our idea to do that. So use this that I call quietly detection of the device, of the behavior, and you can reinforce your checking and the onboarding and login um, steps. So uh, you and in this step is very important to clear define what behaviors you absolutely won't tolerate and won't allow to enter your platform, and what you're willing to let through when in doubt. So as I said, one device with three accounts, no more suspicious things related. I have a DAO and I'm going to let this consumer in, and then yeah, we're going to move to the next step of the journey. So this is the first step. Monitor, know deeply your consumer in the step of the creation of accounts and the login step, and then build a strong monitor tool that can see what are the behavior of these consumers when they are in your platform, when they are using your coupons, and you can combine with this with a smart and strong automatic block that can block the usage of the coupons. So, for example, if you let this device with three accounts to go into your platform and use your campaigns, if this device that uh, you are already looking at him and you say you are using a lot of coupons in a short period of time, so I'm going to block you. So uh, saying a very simple way is basically that: reinforce and know deep, more than blocking in the first steps and onboarding steps. The moment of the creation of the account is know everyone who is entering in your platform, and then monitor very deeper, very closely, and decide what are you going to block or what are you going to allow in your platform. So we had a lot of good results doing that. I can share you with you some numbers. We had a decrease of more than 90% in your coupon abuse fraud and loyalty programs fraud, using this strategy to map all the journey, to put anti-fraud intelligence in all this journey and act together with the strategy of the whole company. So I think we can go, my piece of advice is to go in this way.
That that's a great result. Congratulations on that. And so, do you have anything you would add to Daniela's answer on methods that you're using to prevent promotion abuse without
Yeah,
causing friction
yeah,
or
yeah,
so much
absolutely.
friction?
Yes, yes. So I kind of end up agreeing with Danny on more often than not. What she mentioned, with advanced detection and kind of actually understanding the root cause of why an abuse is happening is really important. In addition to that, right, and a couple of points I'd like to quickly add here is that something that we're working on right now is kind of figuring out how can we share signals across different entities, right? So if you see let's say a fraud happening, like let's say an account takeover or a refund abuse, or like there's a fake restaurant or an impersonation that's happening on restaurants and diners and whatever else is happening, kind of consolidating all those signals, let's say IPs and emails and devices, kind of having that list and integrating that into your decision making into promo abuse would definitely be helpful, would be a great starting point, I would say. Because generally speaking, these fraudsters are almost always concentrated. They're the same guys sitting in one place. They're just repeating different types of fraud. So generally, it does help. Um, And the second thing is that something this is also something that I'm exploring at this point is, instead of kind of taking a reactive approach, where we say that, hey, when there's an order being placed using a promo at the time of checkout, we're going to say, hey, we're going to reject you. A better option would be to say that, hey, wherever the promo decisions are being made, saying that, hey, which customers are you going to send these promos to? If you're able to put your decision making at that point, you don't even have to say that, hey, I have this, I've rejected these many orders, or I've kind of created friction for these many users, right? So even before you send out these promo referrals, or sorry, promo emails and all these advertising out, you figure out who are your good customers first, and then just only target them, right? So that would basically eliminate the potential friction that might be caused between the fraud team and the growth team. So that's actually a very interesting perspective that I'm trying to work on right now. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, everything that Danny mentioned, we're doing everything the same. So yeah.
Those are some great insights, dear. I have a question for you and for Daniele. Do you have
Mhm.
any best practices for buying from marketing growth for cracking down promo abuse? How can you make a case that the fraud prevention is a growth enabler and not a growth blocker? How do you bring that information to the table to convince them that your strategy is enabling growth and not blocking good users?
Well, this is the topic that I enjoy the most talking about. So I really think fraud prevention is a growth enabler. So first of all, our what we need to do as anti-fraud managers, we need to provide visibility on the data and on the risks involved, share data and analysis that can highlight potential issues and show growth team, senior leadership team, what kind of abuses can, how these abuses can harm long-term profitability and will affect our future growth metrics. So I think our first goal and challenge is to give them visibility on what is happening. So people, they don't see, often growth teams, they don't have visibility on how inefficient is a campaign being. So here in the delivery have several examples of campaigns and loyalty programs that with a very strong fraud prevention strategy, they grew like a lot, like 10 times it was growing after we connected and solid fraud prevention strategies. So and the part that can be the difficult one is the fraud prevention teams need to know that uh, we must align our strategy to the overall company strategy. So especially when we're talking about that gray zone that I was mentioning, sometimes the moment of the company is to grow brand awareness. So we need people to know our company, we need people to use our coupon. So I'm going to be more soft with fraud prevention in these cases, especially because we have this gray zone. But sometimes profitability is the goal and we have to look to it. We cannot lose any more extra money, so we are going to look to profitability, ROI, and we are going to be very strong in fraud prevention. So I think these are the two steps. You have to highlight all the issues, to give visibility to these teams, to the growth team, to the marketing team, and then deeply align with them the strategy that must be the company strategy, to be softer, to be more flexible, or to be stronger in fraud prevention. I think this is the secret that is not secret, but it's the case to success, to go in this way. So well, I think that's it.
And we talked a lot about the marketing team being on the table when we were discussing the strategy to prevent from abuse in promotion fraud. And a question for you, Sudhir, who else needs to be at the table when you're building your promo abuse strategy? And how do you keep them aligned?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, in addition to, of course, the cross-functional partners that Danny mentioned, I'd also probably want to keep in loop the engineering and the customer care support teams as well. Engineering is that, once we have kind of some solutions that we want to get in place, more of a long-term solution, as I mentioned, what I mentioned earlier, you're going to need their support. You're going to need to kind of work with them to prioritize and put it on their roadmaps and kind of work with them. So it's really important to have them as well. And also secondly, the customer support as well. So they are the ones, I feel, that more like the frontline defense, I'd say. They are the ones who would hear about any kind of abuse or any kind of complaints or any issues. The agents are the ones who are going to hear about it first, right? So it's important to kind of have a feedback loop with them to understand or to kind of get that feedback to the fraud team is really important. And also, I think, just to kind of quickly add here, kind of keeping them aligned is, obviously having a constant communication line open with all of these teams is necessary. But I'd also kind of maybe I'd like to uh, kind of alter the KPIs that we generally look at when I'm talking to those teams. I don't want to kind of look at, I don't want to tell them that, hey, the fraud rate is something that I'm looking at. That's probably not what they're interested in. So maybe we can project it as saying that, hey, because we stopped this much fraud, this is the growth rate that we have delivered to you. So just kind of tweaking the KPIs that we track is probably is going to be beneficial, and it's going to be kind of a more of a combined alignment that we have to say that, hey, we're achieving whatever the company's goals are, right? So that I feel is very critical.
Thank you for the insights. Um, There's one question here from Zafar. Given that IMAs can be masked and cloning applications can generate multiple device IDs, what strategies can be employed to address this challenge and prevent fraud? I can take this one because there are some steps, some stages that we see the fraud happening regarding promotion abuse. So the fraudsters are not going to stop with just one tactic. They're going to try something. If we start to identify that behavior, that strategy, they're going to try something new, they're going to adapt. So usually what we see here at Incognia is the first stage is they try to start with multi-accounting. They leverage the fact that a lot of the platforms are not using strong device ID, a persistent device ID that is capable of detecting fraud. And then they're going to leverage this fact and create multiple accounts until these accounts start to be blocked. Whenever a strong device, just such as Incognia solution, is applied, then they're going to try to go to another stage, which is like reinstalling the app. But with that behavior, a persistent device ID like Incognia's is not going to change. They go then to the application of stronger or more sophisticated methods, such as app and device tampering. So they might use emulators, like I mentioned, they might use app cloners, they might use some other sophisticated methods like rooting the devices. So if the platform cannot detect these integrity issues, they're going to be able to escalate the fraud and go undetected for a long time. And then third stage, what they're going to try to do is they're understanding that the device is being tracked, and they'll try to factory reset these devices. So that way, a new device ID is going to be created. So when that happens, what we can do to detect, we have different ways to detect factory reset, but a very reliable method that we have at Incognia is detecting these clusters of new devices appearing on the same physical location. We can also detect device reset in other methods, but this is a very interesting one. When many devices are dying on the same location and new devices are appearing, you can say that behavior is a factory reset. And then the fourth stage is they're going to try to do some changes on the device. So when or change the device. Sorry, if the device that they are using is being re-identified as fraudulent, is they're not being able to create accounts or use coupons anymore using that device, they're going to try to use a new device, right? So if that happens, one detection that can be very helpful is connected to the identification of a flagged location, a location that's already linked to fraud. And that's the name of a feature that we have at Incognia, environment linked to fraud. This can flag an environment that has been detected as fraudulent before by a device or an account that committed fraud and was reported by the platform. And whenever a new device comes to this environment, it's going to be flagged as fraudulent as well. So your platform can take the measures necessary to prevent it from using coupons or even blocking the account if it comes down to it. But it's a way to be proactive to this new device that is entering your platforms. So each of these layers shut down abuse without hurting real users. The impact to false positives is very, very low. Um, let me see if we have still some other questions. I think we have another one about Gen AI. This is a hot topic. So, for any of you guys that want to respond this one, can you elaborate more on use of anomaly detection? Do you see any application of generative AI tools in fraud detection?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is, we're seeing a lot of, uh, lot of places where multiple synthetic identities are being created using Gen AI. When I say that, it's more at scale, right? So saying that there's hundreds and thousands of accounts, new accounts are being created, so quickly. That is one way fraudsters are using Gen AI, and the other side we also see that deep fake documents are being created. Deep fake documents and videos are being created to onboard restaurants and kind of create which basically links into that collusion aspect which I spoke about earlier. So we do see a lot of cases popping up recently where fraudsters are using AI significantly.
Thank you, Sudhir. It's time to wrap up. Thank you, Daniele and Sudhir. We loved your presence here today. Thank you, everyone, for the participation. I hope we've answered all the questions. If we haven't, we're pleased to take this conversation on a one-on-one, like you suggested, Mona Lisa. Huge thanks to everyone that participated. I hope you got some good ideas on how to prevent criminal abuse. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to send out the recording of the session as soon as it's ready. And feel free to share it with colleagues, with anyone that you think might benefit from hearing this conversation. All right. So thanks again for joining us. And I hope to see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Sudhir.
All right.
Bye.